Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Mound the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Got a great Friday show for you guys today. There's my screen. Awesome show, actually. Yes, we're going to be talking a lot about the new book, of course, that's out, Fire and Fury. That's got a lot of segments on that. But also, we're going to go to the ocean is no longer going to be capable of supporting life. That's fantastic. The Comcast lying about the tax cuts, of course. And we also have President Trump allowing drilling all over the coastline. So, yay, we are now opened up to even more drilling. Wonderful. So we've got all that stuff. Fascinating stuff about President Trump and what it's like to be his friend. Steve Bannon, all that stuff. So, great show, great Friday show. I do want to start out with something a little bit more, well, we're going to start out with fun, and then we're going to get into disaster. So, let's do that first, actually. Before I get into the stories, I do want to thank the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank everybody who's tuning in to watch us live on both Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't already, please give us a share. And if you like what we're doing, give us a like as well. So, all right. Now, let's go into the first story. And actually, I didn't prepare this first one, but I figured I would talk about it anyway because it's hilariously awesome. So let's get to that first. Yeah, I didn't even have a sidebar for it, so that's how it's off the cuff. All right. So recently, Michael Wolff came out with, well, actually, Michael Wolff has released his book today, Fire and Fury, right? An inside look into the Trump White House, Trump presidency. And in it, there are a lot of amazing things. I mean, just straight up off the wall stuff about how stupid President Trump actually is. We already knew that. And so in the midst of all these different revelations coming out, there's actually something, well, I was going to say internet. There are people that are doing parodies of it, which of course is going to happen on the internet. And one such parody is actually going viral. And this is the Guerrilla Channel. I love this. Now, this is from Politico. Amid the cascade of revelations from Michael Wolff's incendiary book about the Trump administration, one Twitter user posted a screenshot of what looked like an especially stunning excerpt. It described how the president and his first night in office had complained that White House televisions did not carry, quote, the Guerrilla Channel. The Guerrilla Channel! And that Trump had apparently spent 17 hours a day watching guerrilla programming his staff had subsequently produced themselves. So that's awesome. In this, and I love this, right? This comes from Pixelated Boat, which is a fantastic Twitter handle. I would definitely follow that. So he made this up, and I want to make sure to let you guys know that this is satire. This is not actually real, but I'm going to get into later of why people think it's real. He wrote, or she, I don't know who Pixelated Boat is, to appease Trump, White House staff compiled a number of guerrilla documentaries into a makeshift guerrilla channel broadcast into Trump's bedroom from a hastily constructed transmission tower on the South Lawn. However, Trump was unhappy with the channel they had created, moaning that it was, quote, boring, because the guerrillas aren't fighting. Again, that is super awesome. There's more. Staff edited out all the parts of the documentaries where guerrillas weren't hitting each other, and at last the president was satisfied, citing an insider who said Trump would watch the Guerrilla Channel for 17 hours straight on some days. Quote, he kneels in front of the TV with his face about 4 inches from the screen and says encouraging things to the gorilla, like, the way you hit that other gorilla was good. Again, that is super awesome parody, and I absolutely love it. Now, of course, a lot of people did fall for this, and to some extent, I can't necessarily blame them. Yes, this is off the wall. Imagine if you talked about President, for example, George W. Bush, right? Talking about stupid presidents. Let's go with him. If somebody were to say that George W. Bush complained about the Guerrilla Channel and watched it 4 inches from the TV and was like, you hit that gorilla. You hit that gorilla real good. Yeah, that's right. No, everybody would be like, you're insane. Now, in the era where the insane is now normal, a lot of people are like, I don't know, is this real? This could be real. This seems like it. It seems like it's pretty close to reality. So yes, even Eric Garland, of course, fell for this one. He said, I got totally punked by the Guerrilla Channel thing, but when you've already gotten to eating KFC in bed, I mean, we're through the looking glass, Garland tweeted on Friday. So, and that's in response to, or that's referring to a claim that Trump eats fast food in bed, which is totally believable. Again, he does watch about 8 hours of Fox News a day, sitting in bed eating fast food. A lot of this stuff, I mean, look, the reason that this is somewhat believable is that we have already gone far, far beyond the norms of a president, right? So this is somebody, again, who eats fast food all the time, who watches TV all the time, who does not care about the job that he's doing, the most important job in the United States, being the leader, being the president. Doesn't care about any of that, doesn't care about facts, doesn't know what he's doing, appears to be mentally deficient or senile. So, yes, it's understandable that even this satire, look, satire has become reality at this point. So, or at least the line has blurred between the two, thanks to what, I mean, you ask anybody a couple of years ago, would Donald Trump become president of the United States? You would get laughed out of the room. Parody has become reality. Satire has become increasingly difficult to do in these days. So, look, hats off to Pixelated Boat because it was fantastic. And it's funny because afterwards he's like, he had to change his name on Twitter to, hey, the Guerrilla Channel thing is not real, because so many people actually believed it. So it just really shows how far through the looking glass we have come in this nation. Okay, anyway. I just wanted to address that because it is awesome. Okay. Moving forward to the rest of the stories. We have Steve Bannon. Fun times. All right. Now, following the release of excerpts from Michael Wolff's new book, Fire and Fury, the alliance between Steve Bannon and Donald Trump has been essentially dissolved. All right. They are no longer buddies. They are no longer friends. They no longer talk to each other. And the White House, of course, is like, oh, no, we're not even friends. We didn't even talk with with Steve Bannon. Donald Trump does not talk. He has nothing to do with our campaign. Had really nothing to do with anything. And he overstates his importance. So that's about as rough as Trump could get. Basically said, yeah, small impact. Don't even talk to him. Not even a figure. Don't care. Okay, anyway. Now, that alliance is gone. But what about the legions of loyal Breitbart readers who also happen to be MAGA? Well, there seems to be a bit of a divorce happening there as well, which is driving a debate among the board of Breitbart of whether or not to get rid of Steve Bannon. Nice. Now, the Wall Street Journal reported that members of the right-wing news network's board debated on Thursday whether or not to oust Steve Bannon. Now, this is important because, and you'll see who the important person is behind this. This is Rebecca Mercer, right? Now, Rebecca Mercer is very important in conservative politics, very important in the Trump circle. Now, she's a member of the board as well to Breitbart, and she had put out a statement essentially distancing herself from Steve Bannon. She said, I support President Trump and the platform upon which he was elected. My family and I have not communicated with Steve Bannon in many months and have provided no financial support to his political agenda, nor do we support his recent actions and statements. Well, that's not necessarily true. I believe they actually were speaking before. I believe I had seen an article probably a month or two ago where Rebecca Mercer was supporting Bannon's plan to go and primary a lot of Republicans. These are establishment Republicans. But anyway, so now Sarah Huckabee Sanders also weighed in during the White House press briefing when she was asked about Bannon. Let's take a look.
And it wasn't just criticizing, it was a little bit different than that.
Well, but should Breitbart part ways with Steve Bannon after these comments in these books?
I certainly think that it's something they should look at and consider. Brian?
Thanks.
Ouch. Okay. So now you have the Mercers, who are the biggest financial backers of Donald Trump, saying goodbye to Bannon as well as the White House. But it actually gets worse for Bannon. Bannon is also in danger of losing control of Breitbart News as well as his hosting gig on the news network's daily radio show on SiriusXM, Breitbart News Daily. This is according to a source familiar with the situation, talking to the newspaper. So, look, he's done. He's done. If Bannon survives this, I would be absolutely shocked. This seems to be a full-fledged rebellion against him. If it isn't clear by now, it looks like Breitbart is planning to go down with the ship, the MAGA ship. They are MAGA forever. Okay. Now, as far as Bannon, look, I'm not necessarily discounting him yet. There could be a way he could ass-kiss his way to being able to at least stay on the board. I don't know. Now, with Trump, I think he's kind of burned that bridge. Again, if you ass-kiss hard enough, you might be able to get back into the good graces of Daddy Trump, but I don't know. The statement from the White House was pretty harsh. And I think ultimately, when it comes to Bannon, the damage is already done. Okay. All right, let's move forward. So Fire and Fury is now the book that is rocking the Trump White House because inside of it there's some amazing revelations about the president. Now, and not just about the president, also about the president's family. One of them is how Jared and Kushner and Ivanka Trump would actually start to, or actually had placed the blame on their father for their own bad advice, their own bad decisions. Now, in The Hollywood Reporter, Wolf wrote about the decision to fire Comey, for example, which led to, of course, to the arrival of Robert Mueller. Now, he writes, by July, Jared and Ivanka, who had, in less than 6 months, traversed from socialite couple to royal family to the most powerful people in the world, were now engaged in a desperate dance to save themselves, which mostly involved blaming Trump himself. Quote, it was all his idea to fire Comey. No. It wasn't my bad advice. No. Trump came up with it on his own. We had nothing at all to do with that mess. Please don't indict us. Again, that's not true. Previous reporting from the Wall Street Journal said that, and this is according to 4 other people familiar with the discussions, that Kushner had actually pushed Trump to fire Comey. We know Trump is not a very smart person, and he listens to people who's in the room, right? So normally it's the last person in the room, but usually I would think that it's more of who is the person that Trump trusts the most. And earlier on, it was Kushner, it was Ivanka. So now so much, or not so much now, but the person who actually is the closest to Trump is Hope Hicks. But I'm going to get to a story on her later. Now, one said that Kushner and other top White House officials believed Comey was too unpredictable After his handling of the probe into Hillary Clinton's emails, another said Kushner thought Democrats would cheer Comey's firing after his handling of the Clinton investigation, and that FBI agents who were unhappy with his performance would also applaud the move. Awesome. Now, of course, White House lawyers are like, no, I didn't, no. We completely deny that. And Trump, look, also helped out his case by stupidly admitting that he came up with the idea. He actually took credit for this in an interview with ABC News. He said that, no, the whole Comey, Russia thing. First of all, Russia thing, fake news, very sad, right? I came up with the idea to fire Comey to get the pressure off the Russia thing. So, hey, but look, Kushner did support it. So I actually do believe that at least the idea was planted in his head to fire Comey. So, from Kushner. Now, Wolf also added a remark from former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon, who said that, quote, the daughter will bring down the father. Or, in this case, apparently throw him under a bus. Wolf continues. To say that no one was in charge, that there were no guiding principles, not even a working organization chart, would again be an understatement. Stating that many cabinet members looked at the others and wondered, quote, what do these people do? Well, in the case of Jared and Ivanka, that's pretty easy to answer. They do nothing. Look, they give bad advice. That's it. They don't actually add anything or do anything. Ivanka's there only because, oh, it's Trump's daughter. That's nepotism, right? And Kushner, also nepotism. He's just along for the ride. They don't really add anything. They're not even good political advisors just because they know nothing about politics. They're not political people. And Kushner himself is an idiot who in a lot of ways resembles Trump. And you wonder why Ivanka married him. We're talking about a guy, and this is a quote from Harleen Kalin, who worked for Kushner at The Observer. She said, we're talking about a guy who isn't particularly bright or hardworking, doesn't actually know anything. She also said he has bought his way into everything ever with money he got from his criminal father, and that he is deeply insecure and obsessed with fame. You don't buy the New York Observer, marry Ivanka Trump, or constantly talk about the phone calls you get from celebrities if it is your nature to shun the spotlight. Kushner, she continued, or concluded, sorry, is, quote, basically a shithead. Hey, that sounds a lot like President Trump. And you know what else Donald Trump does? He blames other people for his mistakes. We shouldn't be surprised that both Jared and Ivanka are now throwing their dad under the bus in order to protect themselves, because it seems exactly the kind of thing that they all would do. Okay. So, I'm going to take a quick break here. We've got more stories, including Hope Hicks and what Donald Trump does to his friends. Awesome. All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. More stories. Let's get right to them. Now, President Trump had once referred to his communications director as, quote, the best piece of tail Corey Lewandowski would ever have. Now, this comes from an excerpt from Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury. And in it, Wolff claims that the president made a comment to his then press secretary, Hope Hicks, after she expressed concerns about how the press was treating Corey Lewandowski. This was Trump's former campaign manager. So, look, hey, the press went after Lewandowski, as they would. And, you know, whether you think it's fairly or unfairly, here's Hope Hicks, obviously very conservative, very pro-Trump, but she's like, I think that the media is treating Corey Lewandowski very unfairly. Okay, hey, if you have that opinion, okay, I don't agree with you, but sure. So she's trying to figure out ways to protect Corey Lewandowski, who she's had an on-again, off-again relationship with, right? And so here's Trump in his response to that. The book states that Hicks was sitting in Trump Tower with Trump and his sons, wondering aloud how she could help Lewandowski with the press when the president interjected, quote, "You've already done enough for him." Trump allegedly responded to Hicks, "You're the best piece of tail he'll ever have." He added in a comment that reportedly sent Hicks running from the room. Well, yeah, that would make sense. If somebody basically referred to you as nothing more than a piece of ass, then, yeah, that might embarrass the hell out of you and make you want to run from the room. Makes all the sense in the world. Now, this is interesting because we know how the president generally views women, right? But this is somebody who's actually really, really close to him, which is fascinating. In fact, Hicks is described as a close confidant of the president. Wolff's book also claims that the president seems to treat Hicks in a very protective and even paternal way. So, I don't know, maybe in his own weird ways, like, oh yeah, you're the best piece of tail. Like, that's like a compliment in Trump world. Hey, you're the best piece of ass he's ever had. And so, you don't need to do anything more for him. You've already done more than enough. So, yeah, I could see how with people, or I should say among people with certain mindsets, I could see how that could be construed as a compliment. But Hope Hicks running from the room didn't exactly feel complimented by that. Now, she is, of course, his most trusted advisor as well. According to Wolff writing for The Hollywood Reporter, Hicks' primary function was to tend to the Trump ego, to reassure him, to protect him, to buffer him, and to soothe him. It was Hicks who, attentive to his lapses and repetitions, urged him to forego an interview that was set to open the 60 Minutes fall season. Instead, the interview went to Sean Hannity from Fox News, who, White House insiders explained, was willing to supply the questions beforehand. What? Like, are you saying Trump can't handle a normal interview? Come on. But Sean Hannity's like, no, we're going to give you all the questions beforehand so you can make sure to write up some answers. Oh, well, isn't that lovely? So, now, Brad Parscale, digital director for Trump's 2016 campaign, also previously described Hicks's relationship with Trump as familial. Quote, she has a great Trump radar and understanding how he thinks. She loves him like a father in some ways, and I think that is an important loyalty to the family. This was from a Newsweek interview back in November. Quote, they're so close that White House staffers refer to the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, as her father's real wife, which is a little creepy, and communications director Hope Hicks as the president's real daughter. Where's Melania in all this? Maybe in a separate bedroom, wondering how the hell she got into this mess. Not entirely sure. But on Hicks, see, like, for her, it doesn't matter how close you are, how much of a confidant and advisor you are to the president. You're still always just a piece of tail. That's how Trump sees women, as objects. Now, look, if you think that's going to turn off a lot of people to Trump, you're actually wrong. You don't know people. There's actually a lot of dudes who love Trump because they're just like him. because they see women as objects as well. Now, it's funny because they're like him, but without the money. And here's the thing. Trump he's not a success because he's smart. He's lucky. He is part of the lucky sperm club. So he got a lot of money from his dad. But there are a lot of people who act like Trump who are broke as shit and still think that they're the best, that they're the greatest, and that it's everybody else's fault that they're not living up to their full potential. They blame everybody else for their failures. They constantly and consistently objectify women based on their looks. And ironically, I've known a few personally who live off their women, as Trump would do if he hadn't received all of this money from his daddy. This guy's a loser. And also somebody who does not see women as fellow human beings, but just nothing more than pieces of tail. He is a gross person, and people who support him are also gross people. Okay. I'm fairly clear. But if it's not clear how gross of a person Donald Trump is, there's more. Wait till you see how he treats his friends. Now, I've been saying all along that President Trump is a pretty terrible person, right? And we have all these different hints about how he treats people close to him and what he says about women and what he says about other people. And the truth is that it's actually worse if you're his friend. Apparently, Trump had come up with plans to sleep with his friends' wives. I kid you not. According to Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, Trump had an intricate plan of deception with the stated goal of being able to sleep with his friends' wives. This is amazing. Now, Katie Torr, who is NBC News' former embedded reporter who followed the Trump campaign around, she actually tweeted out a highlighted section. I'm going to read that to you now. Trump liked to say that one of the things that made life worth living was getting your friends' wives into bed. In pursuing a friend's wife, he would try to persuade the wife that her husband was perhaps not what she thought. Then he'd have his secretary ask the friend into his office. Once the friend arrived, Trump would engage in what was for him, more or less, constant sexual banter. Let me give you an example of that. Do you still like having sex with your wife? How often? You must have had a better fuck than your wife. Tell me about it. I have girls coming in from Los Angeles at 3 o'clock. We can go upstairs and have a great time, I promise. And while he's talking about all this stuff, he's got the girlfriend listening in on the speakerphone, or the wife listening in on the speakerphone. That's amazing. And it's incredibly gross, right? So you're going to set your friend up. You're going to drive apart relationships. You're going to encourage people to cheat on each other. And then, like a predator waiting, you're going to swoop in and be like, hey, baby, I'm sorry he did you wrong like that. Don't worry, though. Daddy Trump is here with you. I'm here for you. Amazing. Amazing. What kind of friend causes all that misery all in an effort to sleep with your wife? That's crazy. And look, to be fair, some people are kind of into that. In fact, I think the right has a word for that. And look, if you're into that, you're into that. But and if you happen to be a friend of Donald Trump, he can hook you up. He's more than happy to sleep with your wife. I'm not hating on those people, but for everyone else, who would want to be friends with someone like that? I mean, Jesus. And the sad thing is, I know people like Donald Trump, except without having the money, right? They're the same kind of people who would do the same kind of thing. They'd be more than willing to fuck over their friends in order to steal their dates, their girlfriends, or wives. Also, they can have sex with them. It's crazy. But it also goes to show how they think about women as nothing more than objects to be fought over. And I know it's not surprising that President Trump is a bad person, but now we're just getting the details of how terrible of a person he actually is. I mean, the Access Hollywood tape should have been enough for people to make up their minds, because that's when he basically admitted, yes, I grabbed women by the genitals without consent. Well, they let me do it. Well, how do you know if you didn't ask? If you ask and they let you, hey, I don't have a problem with that. That's consensual. That's your business. But You grab them because you think you can without consent. Well, then that's the problem, right? And he had been caught bragging about fondling women without that consent. So I don't think it's much of a stretch to think that he would do other things that is obviously very deceptive and just terrible. And this is another one of those things where he actually tries to set people up, set up friends, and to try and ruin relationships, also that he can get women to sleep with him. That's who Donald Trump is. Okay. So that's all the Michael Wolff stuff. So now let's go to some actual policy. Let me do our Comcast story, actually. Okay. I'm out of order here. You guys remember how those giant tax cuts for corporations were supposed to create jobs? I mean, you know, all these different companies were like, we're going to now create so many jobs. There's going to be jobs everywhere. They're going to be falling out of everybody's ass. So we're going to have jobs everywhere, right? As long as we get these tax cuts passed, you're going to have jobs. Well, what happened? Where were the jobs? Look, AT&T and Comcast, a couple of the companies promised to create more jobs if Trump signs the tax cuts. Well, he had signed the tax cuts, and they're going to go into effect. So what happened? Well, according to Ars Technica, Comcast had just fired about 500 salespeople before Christmas. So let's talk about having a happy holiday, right? Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're in America now. It's a Merry Christmas, right? So these 500 employees get fired right before Christmas. Well, you know, so much for the holiday spirit, right? And if that's not bad enough, they actually tried to keep these firings secret while they lobbied for the corporate tax cuts. Now, that is pretty bad, right? Now, how did they try to keep this secret? Well, the people that were fired, in order to get a severance package, they were forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The Philadelphia Inquirer revealed the Comcast firings this week in an article based on information from an anonymous former employee, Comcast documents, and other sources inside the company. The former employee who talked to the Inquirer could not be identified because of a non-disclosure agreement as part of a severance package. The Inquirer headline notes that Comcast was able to implement the firings quietly, avoiding all press coverage until this week. So let me lay this out here. So they fired these 500 people. They had been planning on firing these people all the time, privately. However, publicly, they're saying, no, we're going to do more investment. We're going to create more jobs. We're going to hire more people if you get these tax cuts. Well, you got your tax cuts. Now what? They knew all along that they were going to take that tax cut and basically put it back into their pockets. That's the whole point. Ours asked Comcast if all 500 employees had to sign those waivers, but did not receive an answer. But they also asked why the firings were necessary, given that the tax cut was supposed to create more Comcast jobs. Finally, they asked if Comcast has specific plans to create jobs in other areas. I'm going to give you part of their statement. They said, periodically reorganize groups and employees and adjust our sales tactics and talent. This change in the central division is an example of this practice and occurred in the context of our adding hundreds of frontlines and sales employees' jobs. All these employees were offered generous severance and an opportunity to apply to other jobs at Comcast. Oh, it's okay, guys. They got a generous severance and they're able to apply for a new job. No, they weren't moved somewhere else and were given a job, moved to another place to do another job. No, they were given the opportunity to apply. Wonderful. So that means they basically have to give up seniority, benefits, and likely pay raises. How generous is Comcast? But Jeff, you don't understand. They didn't have to give them a severance package. No, you know what this package is? This was hush money. That's what this is. They thought, okay, it's the holidays. It's almost Christmas. We've been lobbying really hard for these gigantic tax cuts. The PR is going to look really bad if we fire these people while we're simultaneously saying that if you give us these tax cuts, we're going to create more jobs. I know. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give them a severance package, but we're going to tie it to an NDA. Shut your mouth so we can lie about tax cuts. That's the whole point. Now, obviously, this is super gross. More details. Now, the firings happened around December 15th, and on December 20th, Comcast announced that because of the pending tax cut and recent repeal of net neutrality rules, it would give special bonuses of $1,000 to more than 100,000 employees and invest more than $50 billion in infrastructure over the next 5 years. Comcast said at the time, with these investments, we can expect to add thousands of new direct and indirect jobs. Well, okay, $50 billion, right, in investment. Oh, because of net neutrality being repealed and because of the tax cuts. Well, no, actually, that $50 billion was already set to be invested. According to the article, Comcast's annual investments already soared during the 2+ years that net neutrality was on the books. And the $50 billion amount could be achieved if those investments simply continued increasing by a modest amount. They were already investing. And yet they come around and they basically lie to your face and said, we're going to invest this money only if we get these tax cuts. Or because of these tax cuts, we are now investing when you plan on investing the entire time. And that's also why you wanted to keep these 500 firings quiet. That's the problem here, right? I mean, look, they kept it quiet because do these 500 fired employees look like investment? No, of course not. And on these employees, let me tell you who they were. They were managers, supervisors, and direct salespeople in Chicago, Florida, and other parts of Comcast's central region, mostly in the Midwest and southeastern United States. Now, the salespeople are generally the people that I think are lowest paid. Now, when Comcast announced the firings internally, the employees were told that a new direct sales system requires fewer humans. The fired employees told the Inquirer. Now, look, companies, yes, eliminate positions they no longer need all the time. Technology gets better. It does usually require fewer people. I understand that. So they were going to eliminate these positions anyway. My problem is the fact that they lied about it. They not only lied to the public, but they lied to their own workers. These workers did not see that coming. In the article, they included a couple of personal stories. One employee kept holding his head and saying, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." Another one was worried about how he was going to find new health care coverage. And a third employee was close to purchasing a new home and had feared the personal income hit. So, look, Comcast, it's fairly obvious that they lied to all of us. Oh, don't worry, we're going to create more jobs, we're going to invest more if we have those tax cuts. They didn't actually do that. And when are you guys going to understand that cutting corporate taxes does not necessarily mean creating jobs? It never has, it never will. In fact, Comcast is even looking at laying off even more people. 405 employees are being laid off from a single facility in Atlanta and moving other employees from the facility to different sites, according to the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Comcast told the paper that impacted employees are being encouraged to apply for more than 180 open similar positions in Metro Atlanta, as well as jobs some elsewhere in the company. Comcast apparently estimated that the layoff will impact 290 people or jobs in a notice filed with the Georgia state government. Well, okay, if it impacts, let's say it impacts 290 people. 290 people lose their job. Oh, don't worry, we have 180 open jobs. Similar positions in Metro Atlanta. Well, not only do these people now have to move, but guess what? Not all these people get their jobs back. They're going to have to find different jobs. That's what's going on here. in the end of the day, people are still going to end up losing their jobs. When again, they claimed that getting rid of net neutrality and giving these gigantic corporate tax cuts was actually going to create jobs. Again, they lied to us over and over again. And Comcast is not the only company. AT&T claimed that it would invest another $1 billion because of the tax cut, and said that research tells us that for every $1 billion in capital investment in telecom creates about 7,000 good jobs from the middle class. That's what they claim. Now what? At AT&T, it turns out they're actually laying off thousands of employees now that they got their tax cut. It doesn't work. It is a lie. It is not going to trickle down on you. What it does is that it trickles right back into their pockets. That's the problem with tying tax cuts to job creation. It does not work. Okay. Let's move on. Actually, I'm going to take a really quick, 1 minute break here. We've got 2 more stories for you guys, so stay right here around the nation. All right, back at Around the Nation. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share if you enjoy our content. If not, then whatever. I don't give a shit. All right. Anyway, let's go on to the next story here, which is disastrous for human beings and animals alike. Wonderful. All right. Now, the Trump administration, in a huge move in favor of the fossil fuel industry, has decided to open up nearly all coastal water across the United States for oil drilling, so oil and gas exploration. So, congratulations, oil and gas companies. You now have the entire coastline, or nearly the entire coastline, to go and drill for oil. Wonderful. Now, this proposal lifts an Obama-era ban on drilling that was imposed, obviously, by Barack Obama. Because, of course, if Obama did it, then Trump obviously has to reverse it. He feels compelled for some reason. Did Obama do this? Yes, he did? Okay, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Wonderful. Now, this, of course, is happening while we're having the hottest year on record. I know it doesn't feel like it, especially where I'm at. Since right now, most of the East Coast is being hit by something called a bomb cyclone, which sounds both horrible and kind of awesome at the same time. But I do have to remind people that just because it's cold in North America in the middle of winter in January does not necessarily mean that climate change is not real. It may seem like climate change is completely fake to you in one little tiny area, but climate is a global thing and weather is completely different. I know I have to make that distinction to some people because they just don't seem to get it. But anyway. But here, what we're doing is we're going to open up more drilling across the entire coast of the United States. Now, interestingly enough, this has a lot of even Republicans saying, hold on, wait a minute. For that, I go to the New York Times, who writes that some of these states are led by Republicans, like Governor Rick Scott of Florida, where the tourism industry was hit hard by the Deepwater Horizon rig disaster in 2010 that killed 11 people and spilled millions of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Turns out, having oil-laden beaches, bad for tourism, also bad for fishing, also bad for whatever industry relies on the ocean. Okay. Now, Governor Scott, obviously wanting to protect that, vowed on Thursday to protect the state's coastline from drilling, saying that he would raise the issue with Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. He said, quote, I have asked to immediately meet with Secretary Zinke to discuss the concerns I have with this plan and the crucial need to remove Florida from consideration. My top priority is to ensure that Florida's natural resources are protected. And of course, you also had Senator Marco Rubio coming out against this plan as well. And actually working with Democrats in Florida as well, the Democratic senator, to say, hey, wait a minute, we don't want this. We actually don't want this in Florida. It would be very, very bad. And it's not just Florida. There's actually more states, but the governors of New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, California, Oregon, and Washington have all opposed the offshore drilling plans. Virginia's Governor-elect Ralph Northam said in a statement Thursday that expanding drilling would jeopardize his state's tourism and fishing industries as well as military installations. Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina called drilling a critical threat to his state's economy. Quote, Mr. Zinke said the drilling plan was part of a new path for energy dominance in America, but he said he planned to speak with Governor Scott and other state leaders before the proposal was finalized. Quote, it's not going to be done overnight. Now, I love this. Wait, energy dominance. We're dominating energy. That is absolutely a Trumpism, right? Hey, energy, we're going to dominate you. By what? Drilling all over the coastline? You know, it's funny, a lot of these Republican governors, and I was going to go back to say this about Rick Scott, they don't want this because, guess what? It's not in my backyard. That's what this is about. No, I actually don't want these gigantic drilling operations happening in my state. No, it's fine if it's somebody else's state, but if it's my state, but wait a minute. If oil and gas is so clean and so wonderful, why would you not want it? If it created so many jobs, why would you not want it in your backyard? It seems like, I don't know, whenever you try to bring that up, deflect. But anyway, look, if we actually wanted to dominate energy, we could actually do something different. How about we invest in solar and alternative energies? You know, the energy sources that will never run out. But on that, we're not dominating. We've actually ceded a lot of ground to the Chinese, which is sad because a lot of the job growth in America recently has been in solar. So, but nonetheless, China is kicking our ass when it comes to solar energy. Now, you know that they're actually building a highway made of solar panels. Yeah, they came up with an interesting new way to do it, involving different layers to make sure that they protect the actual solar panels in the middle from the top and the bottom. It's actually fascinating. But of course, in America, what we're doing is we're just opening more oil and gas. Wonderful. I wonder if that has to do with the millions and millions of dollars spent lobbying politicians. I wonder if that has anything to do with this decision. Gee, I can't tell. Okay. One more story for you guys today. Bad news for, well, life on Earth. The ocean is running out of oxygen. Yeah. According to a new review published in Science, the ocean is running out of oxygen, but is running out at a rapid speed. Now, this, of course, is called deoxygenation. Boy, I'm having a hard time with that word. This is called deoxygenation. Now, the researchers discovered a 4 to 10-fold increase in areas of the ocean with little to no oxygen. Now, you might be wondering why us land-loving humans should worry about this. I mean, we don't live in the ocean, right? I mean, we shouldn't care about the ocean. But there's a few reasons that I'm actually going to lay out. For one, you'd be surprised to know that half of the Earth's oxygen originates from the ocean. So that stuff we breathe, about half of it comes from the ocean. I know that's hard for some people to believe, but yes, in the ocean, there are plants and animals that actually give off oxygen. And that happens to be incredibly crucial for marine life. If you don't have oxygen, it turns out a lot of marine life dies. That includes fish. Fish need to breathe. They have gills, right? If the ocean has no oxygen in it, then guess what? We no longer have fish. They all die out. And fish happens to be a huge staple of people from around the world, okay? So now fishing, obviously huge industry. So there's going to be a lot of people's livelihoods that are going to be affected by this. For example, fish kills in a single town they write in the Philippines cost over $10 million, according to the researchers, and coral reefs are valued at $172 billion per year, according to the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. So, wow. Now, those same coral reefs are already being slammed by ocean acidification and higher temperatures. They're also now going to be hit by a third thing, and that is the lack of oxygen in the ocean. Now, Lisa Levin, who is a study co-author and biological oceanographer at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego, told Newsweek, there are a whole bunch of livelihoods that depend on a healthy ocean that doesn't smell and doesn't have a lot of dead stuff in it, which would happen if the ocean no longer has oxygen in it. So, she explains that when the oxygen gets very low in the ocean, animals leave if they can. Those species will relocate, either get eaten or starve to death. So, how bad is this? Well, the team of scientists that studied this is from the United Nations Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission's Working Group. And they noted that the amount of water in the ocean without oxygen has quadrupled in 50 years. It's more than twice as bad for coastal waters, such as estuaries and seas. In those sites, low oxygen areas have increased tenfold since 1950. That sounds bad. Now, remember, the oceans make up about 70% of the Earth's surface. The amount of ocean that has no air, look, if this continues to go exponentially, well, in another 50 years, it's not a stretch to think that it maybe, at least in my opinion, could take up the space of entire continents. I'm not entirely sure. But it is really, really scary to think about an oxygenless ocean with no life inside of it whatsoever. No fish, no sharks, no whales, nothing like that. Just empty water. So, what's the primary drivers of this? Well, you're not going to be surprised that climate change warmer temperatures brought about by climate change specifically. Levin explained that warmer water holds less oxygen. Also, increased surface temperatures make it more difficult for oxygen to reach relatively deeper parts of the ocean. The majority of oxygen loss is occurring at about 300 to 2,200 feet deep. Now, oxygen is typically replenished when surface water mixes with the deeper water, but when the oceans are hotter, there tends to be less vertical mixing. Now, for me, I feel like we barely understand what the impacts of this are going to be. Like, of course, we can speculate, we can look at studies, we can do studies, but in reality, I think there's a lot of things that we haven't even thought of, that we don't understand, or at least the public at large doesn't seem to understand about what's going to happen when it comes to climate change. Maybe the scientists do understand or are beginning to understand, and that's why they're sounding the alarm. But I feel like, I don't know, I have a feeling that this is going to end up being worse than anyone actually thinks. I hope to goodness that I'm wrong. But now there's also another source of deoxygenation, which is not caused by climate change. And this comes from excess nutrients from agriculture and sewage, which causes excess algae growth. They say the decay process of algae uses up oxygen in a process called eutrophication, Levin said. So, yes, that is still also our fault. So what can we do? Well, the decline in ocean oxygen ranks as the most serious effect on effects of human activities on the Earth's environment, says Denise Breitberg, who is the lead author and marine ecologist with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. But as bad as that sounds, and as much impact as we have on creating the problem, we also can solve the problem. How? Halting climate change. Well, we could do that. Now, she says that it requires a global effort. However, even local actions can help with nutrient-driven oxygen decline. And they offered what they call a three-pronged approach to solve the problem: tackling nutrient pollution and climate change, protecting marine life from further stress, and improve low oxygen tracking on a global scale. So, she says, tackling climate change may seem more daunting, but doing it is critical for stemming the decline of oxygen in our oceans and for nearly aspect for life on our planet. So, what she's saying is, look, we can get a handle on this. If we actually go and take steps, we figure out how to control our runoff. And then we figure out how do we mitigate, because climate change is already here. How do we mitigate the worst effects and make sure that it doesn't get even worse than it already is? And that requires drastic action on reducing emissions and reducing pollution. If we don't do this, well, we're fucked. I mean, and we've already seen what the Trump administration's response to this is. They just opened up, speaking of coastal waters, they just undid rules that prevented oil companies from drilling on our coastline. So it seems like whatever we need to do to head off the worst impacts of climate change, we've decided we're going to do the complete opposite. You know, because MAGA. I'm telling you, man, we've got to get a handle on this. I know, look, the science is difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to understand and to get a full grasp on. But you might actually have to put your trust in the scientists who do this for a living. And they're all saying, 97% of them are saying, we got to do something about this, because this could be very, very bad in the long run. Or it's going to be very, very bad in the long run. There's no could about it. So we need to do something, and we need to do something fast. Okay. That's all I got for you guys today. I feel like we went through a lot of content today, so I'm happy about that. All right. We'll be off on Monday for different meetings and stuff. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Make sure to have a very good weekend. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome, amazing, all that stuff. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks to the patrons, obviously. Please give us a like and a share, all that stuff. And we will see you next Tuesday. So have a great weekend. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. Have a great weekend.